My name's Adrian Weinbrecht. I have a background as a commercial photographer. These days, most of what I do involves video and motion content, but we tend to think of ourselves as creating visual content to be used on all media platforms. Photography was one of several career choices I had, and I was fortunate enough to be able to pursue it from a fairly young age, and I was also then lucky enough to have a good amount of success as a stills photographer. And at 17 years of age, I actually started shooting weddings in Australia, and I'm actually half Australian and half German. My dad's German, so I'm sort of laid back and uptight. Weddings was fantastic, and I really enjoy working with people, and for me that was probably the most important thing. So what happened is I then left Australia and I worked as an assistant in Europe, eventually landing here in London, where I've been for the last 20 years. And I think that early wedding experience then led me to really work with people. So as a photographer, I tended to do lots and lots of portrait work for magazines and then later advertising. I think as a photographer, it's really important to photograph the things that you love or the things that you enjoy, and I genuinely enjoy meeting people and just creating imagery that tells a story, really. I think the thing I like most about working as a photographer or an image maker is the diversity. Yesterday I was working on the south coast of England. We were filming outside. Tomorrow I'm going to be in a studio environment for the entire day, and it's just very, very, very interesting. And yesterday was all with natural light. Tomorrow we will be lighting absolutely everything, and it'll be a very structured and controlled environment. And yesterday was really about observation and determining when the light was going to be just right. And I just think it's that mix of things, and also occasionally it's the delight that you can bring someone with an image. I just think this is just a really rewarding thing. I think whether you're creating video content or your focus is on stills, whatever it happens to be, it's all about a story. It's all about informing the viewer about something that's going on. You know, I think within advertising, yes, obviously you're typically showing a product of some description. Not always, but very often there'll be some sort of product aspect. But more often than not, it's about the story of that product or the feeling that particular product creates, whether it's a car or a phone or a pair of shoes. It's really about, you know, what is our response to that particular item. And I think the other thing for me is I fell in love with light at a really young age and would see light everywhere. I think growing up in Australia was sort of, certainly helped that with blue skies every day and plenty of sunshine, but more to the point, it was that early morning light or that late afternoon light that would really draw your attention into, it might be a tree or it could be a building, it could be a face, and it just, things would, with the right light, anything comes to life. And I think if you were starting out in this business right now, today, I think it's a tough business, but I think you need to really focus on creating images around the things that you genuinely love and that you really like being around and that you're actually interested in. There's a lot of nuance around different subject areas. What we've got on the screen here is from a dance shoot I did years ago, and this was shot in Switzerland, and I had no idea I was going to enjoy shooting dance until I did my very, very first dance shoot, which was very successful. And after doing that, I sort of realized that because I had a background in martial arts, I understood particular aspects of human movement and form, and I was able to judge very accurately when a move or position would be at its pinnacle, and that would be the time that we would capture it. So I think really, if you're starting out now, I just really understand what it is that you're interested in. Is it could be animals, it could be landscapes, it could be sports, it could be underwater photography, but just find that niche and make yourself, one of the best or the best within that niche. And I think the other thing as well is if you're starting out now, take the time to learn your craft, because the real difference between a pro and an amateur is that whatever's happening, a pro will deliver. And that's the biggest difference. And it takes time to learn your craft. That, the whole 10,000 hours, that is absolutely real. And I think back of some of the shoots that we've had where, I remember shooting in Italy in September, and it rained solidly for the week that we were meant to shoot, but we had to make it look sunny. And it's how you work around these things with light and just grabbing moments in between the showers. We actually did it, and it's how you might make day look like night, or night look like day. All of this comes down to craft, and I think the more passion you have for a subject, the easier it is to then pursue that craft and actually treat this as a profession. It's not a hobby. If you want to make money from it, then you need to pursue it as a profession, in the same way that a doctor does, or a lawyer does, or a dentist does, or anyone else like that. So you take what you're doing quite seriously, but you maybe don't take yourself too seriously. I think for me, my favourite shoot is the one I'm going to do tomorrow. There's so many shoots that we've had, and there's so many images that we've created that I really love years later, and it's just, I feel very fortunate to be able to make my living doing the things that I love, and for me to pick out one particular shoot out of literally thousands is for me, it's quite impossible. So I think for me it's all about, what are we doing tomorrow? How can we explore this a little bit further? How can we support our client in getting their story, their message across? So there's so many shoots that we've done over the years, whether it's doing photography with the Queen's Bodyguard for Savile Row tailors, and really creating that imagery in a super contemporary way, or it's extracting stills from one of our red cameras on a particular project, or it's maybe seeing. So for me, I was just asked what's been perhaps one of my favourite shoots or most significant shoots, and I think for me it will always be the shoot that's going to happen tomorrow. I used to work a lot with celebrities when I was focusing on being a stills photographer, and I think it was always a privilege to meet these people, but I would treat them just like anybody else, because we're all people at the end of the day. So as with any craft, the tools of your craft are really, really important, and I think what you need to do is, whether it's a camera, a computer, a light, a tripod, a monitor, whatever it happens to be, what you want to do is you really want to learn and understand that tool, so that when you're using it, you don't have to think about using it. It just becomes a natural extension of whatever the task is that you're doing, because the tools alone they're not an end to themselves. They are there to facilitate your vision, whatever your vision happens to be. And it's just so much easier if you really take the time to learn your gear and use it intuitively. So you're not having to think so much, because at the end of the day, photography, filmmaking, visual content, it really is about a vision, and it's about creating that vision or painting that vision with the choice of lenses, the type of lights, the height of the camera, the movement that the subject may or may not have. So I think there's just, your tools are absolutely critical, but you should learn them and choose wisely and carefully, and then forget about them. Look, our company creates visual content, and I work as a photographer and director of photography, and the monitor is the window to your work. If you don't have a really world-class monitor, how do you know what you're looking at? And I've always been very particular around my choice of monitor, and equally so the ability to calibrate that monitor. And I think for the last, gosh, I don't know, it must be probably the last 15 years, all the monitors I've used have been hardware calibrated. And I just wouldn't use anything else. And I'm happy to say that with the BenQ monitors, the ones that, well, not all of them actually, because we've got some cheaper ones as well that we use just purely as palette monitors. So we'll have our main monitor. Oh, that went to sleep, by the way, my bad. So we'll have very often just an image on the screen, and then we'll have another monitor over to the left, and that will have our tools on it. So, and I don't, in terms of our tool monitor, our palette monitor, I'm not too concerned about that being hardware calibrated, but my main monitor must be hardware calibrated, because I want to be absolutely confident about what it is that I'm looking at. What's my favorite BenQ monitor? I think that's a tricky one, because we've got some not so wide BenQ monitors with slightly lower resolution, and then we've got in the office, the main editing computer has a 30-inch 4K monitor that my editor absolutely loves because he's got enough screen real estate that he can assemble all the palettes that he wants on one monitor. He doesn't like to use multiple monitors. He likes to have one great big screen and have everything on that screen in beautiful clarity and wonderful color. For myself, I would have said that particular monitor as well. I can't remember what it's called. I think BenQ need to work a little bit on how they name their monitors, quite frankly. But I've got a new monitor here. It's the SW271. Yeah, it's the SW271, and this looks beautiful, because here in my home office, I actually prefer around 27 inches. It's a really perfect size for me. So I'd say this is probably my new favorite, if I can say that. But it's tricky, it's like children, they're literally like my kids. I mean, I can't, they're all my favorite. That's really the bottom line. And they've been acquired to serve a particular purpose or function, whether that's stills retouching, or it's video editing, or occasionally on-set monitoring, or it's as a palette monitor or something or other like that. They all have characteristics, and what you need to do is you need to just determine what is required and then choose something accordingly. With the previous brands of monitor that we were using, it was really tricky to navigate through the screens, just in terms of making your adjustments and setting things up. They've got this sort of, I don't know, hockey puck style thing, and it just makes everything much, much easier when you're having to make any adjustments. The other thing as well is the BenQ monitors come from the factory with certain calibrations built in, and that means you can literally hit the ground running. So, I mean, for me, the most important thing with the BenQ monitors is the way that what's it called, Palette? What's the software? Palette something or other? Palette Master? It's Palette Master, okay. A really important component of monitors for me is the calibration software. And Palette Master makes it as easy as you want it to be, because you can have a sort of basic setting, or as advanced, in the advanced setting. So, because what we tend to do is we tend to play around a little bit with where we set our calibrations up. The other thing as well is if we're using a monitor for a combination of video editing and stills, we actually will create a calibration profile for each, and it's very easy to switch back and forth between those two profiles. So I think the most important thing for me is with the BenQ monitors is that it's just a gorgeous picture. The colours are rich, there's a fantastic tonal range. If you have a look here, you know, as soon as I calibrated this monitor the other day, I got some black and white images on the screen and just had a really quick look at them, because this is one of the fastest ways to see how strong a monitor is in terms of the tonal range and whether there's any cast appearing in the shadows or the highlights or the midtones. And it's a really great way to assess a good monitor. I know that sounds a bit strange, but it can also be things where if you've got a large white background, for example, is that background being presented evenly? So from corner to corner, do we have uniformity? These things for me are, they're everything. It's just critical, because I need the cleanest, clearest representation of our work, of our visual content as I can get. Like, honestly, I'm really impressed with this monitor, okay? It actually is better than I thought, and I can see there's just incremental improvements. Okay. So our other BenQ monitors are now getting onto a few years old, and they're still fantastic monitors, but I can see incremental improvements in terms of the panel. The blacks just appear to be that little bit deeper. I don't know if they are, but they certainly appear to be that little bit deeper. So the whole representation of a tonal range is quite significant here for me. And then the other thing as well is, I think the monitor behind us, the SW271, is probably going to become our primary photo editing monitor, because it just looks fantastic. Once we've calibrated it into the space that we want to use, it's nothing short of remarkable. And if you don't know what hardware calibration is, it's where you're adjusting the colors and the way the colors are presented directly to the monitor. Now, we also calibrate our laptops, for example, when we're shooting on location, and if it's a critical job, we will have a larger monitor with us, and that will be plugged into, well, it could be a Mac Pro, it could be a laptop, so the client can actually see a calibrated monitor and see the content with the most accurate color possible. But sometimes we'll also just use a laptop screen or something like that, which we also calibrate. But the difference is, when you're not hardware calibrating, you're using the graphics card to interpret the color signal coming in. The graphics card takes that information and makes it represented in the best possible way for the monitor. When you're hardware calibrating, what you're doing is you're speaking directly to the monitor in terms of how color is represented. So what that means is you're then able to get the very best out of that particular panel that's used on that monitor. And I remember when I first sort of switched over to the BenQ monitors, that the way the greens were and certain reds were shown was really quite remarkable. They're a clever bunch of people, they really are.